Welcome to
4Kids Flashback. Hey, Steve.
Hey, Tara.
So today's show is special to me because we will be talking to Michael Haigney.
It's also special for me because this was our very first interview we ever conducted for this podcast.
Right. So if it's a little bumpy, bear with us. We were learning, and hopefully you'll enjoy this one. Did you have any favorite moments from this interview?
I got a kick out of discovering the origins of the infamous jelly donuts from Pokémon.
Yes, watching you learn the origins of the jelly donut was especially fun for me. So we'll bring you that episode. If you want to hear episodes ad-free and early, where should they go?
That's patreon.com/4kidsflashback.
With the number 4. If you try to spell it, I can't promise what you're going to come up with. But so you can go to Patreon to hear those episodes. You can check us out on social media. We're just at 4Kids Flashback everywhere. We even have some cool merch with the amazing logo that Steve designed. So check that out. That's on our website. You can find our link tree. And here's Michael. Hello, Tara. Sands here with my co-host, Steve Yurko. Steve, did
Hello.
I say your name right?
Yes, you did. Yeah, it's not that hard.
Because no matter what order this podcast goes in, this is actually Steve and I's very first interview together, and we started with, can I say my favorite coworker? I shouldn't say that yet because I'll probably say it all the time. One of my favorite coworkers, Michael Haigney, he worked for 4Kids and worked on a lot of shows a lot of you have watched, including Pokémon, Kirby, F-Zero, I believe, right, Michael?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's just jump in.
Hi, Tara. How are you? Hi, Steve.
Hello.
Good. Michael and I just saw each other in person, so this is now weird.
So the thrill is gone. Is that what you're saying? This is like,
bit.
Okay, hi, I see you again. Yeah,
let's just cut that. That was awkward. So Michael, and I've never asked you this before. Were you at first an employee of 4Kids? I think that we're talking around like the late 90s, or were you an employee of Taj Productions when this whole thing started?
Well, I worked with Larry Juris at Taj Productions. I had originally worked with his brother, Mark Juris, on syndicated programming for a number of years. Before that, we worked at an ad agency. And then we worked on syndicated series and specials. I worked on a sports competition show called Blade Warriors, which was like American Gladiators on skates. And then we did 3 2-hour specials called the Horror Hall of Fame 1, 2, and 3 with Freddy Krueger, also known as oh gosh, I just forgot his name, Robert Englund. And so we worked at, and we did, I think, the first show that Kelly Ripa hosted, which was a music show, an alternative music show. But anyway, I had worked with Mark Juris, and his brother Larry had kind of a business that was putting new music to old cartoons for the USA Cartoon Express. And he called me one day and he said, the client wants to keep the music for this one space movie. It was called Golf Force. They want to keep the music, but they want to replace the dialogue. And I had replaced dialogue for the show Blade Warriors. We had shot these big games at the Barker Hangar out in Santa Monica. And then afterwards, I wrote the ad libs for the hosts. So we edited the games together, and I wrote those. So he knew that I had some experience writing for previously recorded visual material. So I said, yeah, I do it. So it was Golf Force. And then after that, he got a contract to do a series called Slayers. And,
yes.
Right.
Oh, I guess I worked with you on Slayers. Okay.
I think so. And Eric Stewart was on that too.
And Veronica,
and Lisa
Ortiz
was on that. Yeah. And several other people too. And then
so that was Central Park Media that you were working
Central
for?
Park Media was one of the companies. Yes. And so then one day at this syndication company, I'd worked with Norman. He did a show called In Sport with Ahmad Rashad. It was kind of a lifestyle sports show. It was kind
For
of an
those who don't
unusual
know,
thing.
that's Norman Grossfeld, who you'll hear about probably throughout this podcast.
Right, and he had eventually become president of 4Kids, and he called me one day and he said, "Hey, we have this show. It was a licensing company. 4Kids is a licensing company." And he said, "Hey, we have this show from Japan, and it's about kids who have these little creatures, and the creatures battle each other." And I said to him, "Is this the series that sent all the kids to the hospital in Japan?" Because at that time it was a big news story. I don't
Seizures.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had one of the episodes that became it was the Porygon episode, which we never showed, but it had flashing lights, which apparently triggered some kids to have a kind of an epileptic kind of a reaction to that. And
Yeah.
he said, "Yeah, yes, that's a series, but we're not going to show that one." So I said, "Send it over," and I looked at it, and I never thought, it was so different
What
from
did you
Bugs.
remember what you watched? Was it episode 1? Was
Yeah, it
it
was
the
episode
first
one.
couple? Okay.
No, as I remember it. I should add this caveat. Anything I'll tell you or anything I say in my own podcast, which is Original Pokemon, which you can listen to wherever people ignore podcasts,
And you
and
should.
ignore it. No. Well, if you want to, sure, if people are busy. But anyway, this is my recollection. And these are my memories of it. Now, people remember things differently, but I'm the hero of my own story, and this is the one I'm sticking to. But anyway, so I watched it, and I said, "Larry, I don't think this is going to last 13 episodes, but we should definitely do it." And and then it went on, and it's still going on. So I was a partner with Larry at Taj Productions, and then eventually I went to work for Norman at 4Kids because they, as you remember, then they got Yu-Gi-Oh, and they got Ultimate Muscle and Fighting Foodons, and then One Piece, and a lot of different series over the years. And I worked on other series as well after Pokemon was up and running.
Did you have a writing background? Did you study writing? I never asked you that.
You know what? I had written tons of when I worked with Larry's brother Mark. I had at an ad agency. We had done tons of promos for Viacom shows at that time, and for movie packages for a series called Divorce Court. And then the producers of Divorce Court wanted, it was such a success when it came back, in the 90s or late 80s, I guess. They wanted to do a show that was a series that was kind of a prequel to Divorce Court, and was called Strictly Confidential. And so instead of and it was a psychologist who would counsel real couples before that were headed for divorce, presumably headed for divorce. So we thought, well, instead of shooting a lot of episodes, what we did was we wrote a lot of sound bites, and we got a lot of different actors and couples in there to just do the sound bites. So we made this sales reel. It was like 5 minutes, as if we had tons of shows in the can already done. And
Wow.
yeah. So, and then from there we did other series and stuff. I don't remember if Strictly Confidential ever got sold. I cannot remember. It was a long time ago.
Bring
But
it
that
back.
was fun. So I did that, and then I said I wrote we wrote the scripts for Horror Hall of Fame, and for the Music Scoop, and for Blade Warriors. But also I had done hundreds of little interstitial things, which were interstitial programs, which were 30-second programs, which wrapped around a sponsor. So we did breathtaking moments for Trident gum, for little vignettes from the movie. So we'd have a little tease, the commercial, and then the payoff at the end. So I had done writing like that, and as I said, tons of promos for movie packages for Viacom and other companies as well.
So I'm curious, is it, I guess I'm trying to think about, is this was this like a lot of the scene in New York? And I'm safe to assume New York.
Yeah, we did the show in New York. Well, I mean, I don't know. I've had kind of a I don't want to even call it a career, but the jobs I've had are sort of peripheral jobs. I started as a page at CBS, and then I got
Mhm.
friendly with somebody there, and his father was the director and producer of live events for CBS, and so I worked on parades and New Year's Eve shows, and went down
Huh.
and to Disney World and to Mickey Gillies and all different places, and then I, from the page job, I met Mark, and then we worked at this ad agency, and then the shows, and then Norman, and then Taj and 4Kids. So what the actual scene was, I have no idea. I don't, I don't know what the what the voiceovers for anime was at that point. Tara, you'd know more than I did because you must have worked on something before you came to work in Slayers. Were you? Did you?
No, Pokemon was my first anime job, and I still don't know how I got it. It's
But
kind
don't,
of a
but didn't you
mystery.
didn't you
I
work?
was
I thought you
doing
worked on
voiceover.
Slayers.
I did. I worked on it after I started Pokemon, though.
Oh, I
Yeah.
see. Okay.
Okay, so this is about you, Michael. Stop asking me questions.
Okay.
um, okay, so you get this project with Larry. How did you become? Because on that, from what I remember, on that first episode, you were not just you were like adapting the scripts and writing them. You were directing the episodes.
Right.
And were
The
you a
voices, yeah.
producer and doing voices? And were you a producer at that point?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Larry would generally book the studio time and would schedule the actors and deal with. I mean, everybody was paid directly from 4Kids, so we would
I
got paid to
I
do the
got paid
show.
by Larry. That's so
You did at the
interesting. Yeah.
beginning?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I didn't see. I didn't
I'm
remember that.
almost positive because I
But
don't
the
think
thing
I
is,
ever heard the name 4Kids. Like that wasn't on my radar. I would go to Taj Productions or Buttons, actually, our very
it was
first
Buttons. Buttons was the
yeah.
first. But here's the thing. My recollection was that all the actors were now you may have gotten your paychecks from Taj, but I think you signed a contract with 4Kids because 4Kids wouldn't have wanted, I don't think, Taj to have had your contracts, because then if the
Right.
show took off, then you would have been under contract to us. So your actual paycheck may have been cut from Taj,
See, this
but
is why
I
we need a
believe your
time machine.
contract was maybe Veronica will remember,
I
but
bet, yeah, we'll ask Veronica. But
the thing was that Larry was the money and scheduling guy, and I was the writer and
voice
director guy,
director, yeah.
voice
So
director for the American version.
you were voice directing Slayers. So did you did you remember the Pokemon auditions?
Well, I've heard Veronica now because we've been to a couple of different conventions together. I haven't been going that long, a couple of years, not quite a couple of years. And she said that we brought her back and we said yes, she had it, and then no, she didn't have it, and then we were going to get a real kid, and then we got somebody else. I'm not saying that that's not true. All I'm saying is I don't remember that.
Okay, so
I
you
just don't
don't
remember.
remember the auditions.
I remember her auditioning, and I remember thinking, oh, this was like a big deal for us because we knew it was going to get on the air. The things that we had done before with Slayers and with the, Golf Force. And I think at that time, Larry, I don't remember if Jim Malone was also directing some other different types of anime that I was not involved with, but like Captain Tyler, that may have come later. But anyway,
Oh.
I wanted this to be good, and I was like, just does she sound enough like a boy? Does it sound like it was tough because I wanted it to be good, and I had known Norman. I wanted to do a good job for him. As I said, I didn't think the show would last, but I thought, well, maybe it'd lead to something else.
Did you know
So,
anything about anime when this started?
well,
Aside from Slayers, but before that?
just as a kid growing up, I knew Astro Boy, and I knew which always freaked me out. Astro Boy was to me a creepy show. I was born in 1956, so Astro Boy came on the U.S. scene, I guess, when I was about 8 or 9. I think it was on, I believe, WPIX in New York, Channel 11, and
Huh.
it was odd because they looked different than American animation, and and I have a lot of sympathy for the man who I now know was Peter Fernandez, because he was the one who who rewrote the scripts and also voiced Astro Boy. Hey, let's go down there. We've got to go down. Please don't. They've got to win the race. Oh, Speed, let's go. Yeah, everything was jammed in, no punctuation. Everything was in there. But I have empathy for him because that's kind of what we had to do too. And I'm sure his budgets were very tight, as were ours. But it was weird and creepy to me, and the way the repeating loops of animation, and the way it was kind of not exactly violent, but something spooky about it. I don't know. So I wasn't an anime fan, and at that time, by the time I started doing the show, I was an older person, and I was working, so I didn't have a lot of time to watch anime on DVDs and I guess discs that started
VHS,
coming
VHS.
out. VHS. I'm sorry, I meant
Come on.
VHS.
How
I meant
dare you.
VHS. Yeah. I just was able to reset my clock on the VHS. So a couple of weeks ago. Anyway, so no, I knew it existed. I knew a little bit about with that post-war animation of Japan's studios and how they did their animation. But no, I didn't know the whole thing because there wasn't one. The one show I think preceded us, which was I think probably the most popular. I think you'd probably know better than I. I think Sailor Moon came out a couple of years before Pokemon. Is that correct?
I would say so. I think that's 1995.
Yeah, I think Sailor Moon and I guess Transformer, Thundercats and things like that. I was vaguely aware of them, but I didn't watch them.
I'm curious with the Pokemon stuff, and I don't know if I'm jumping the gun here in the conversation. How close were you working with the Japanese side of it? Because you were doing a lot. You're not only directing it and acting it, but you're writing the scripts too. I'm curious how heavily they were involved with the adaptation.
My recollection was that I worked with Norman on that first episode. Norman was a very creative person. He had been a director for Olympics Triple Cast and had done a lot of different things, so he had a lot of ideas about how that first episode should go. I remember really going over it with a fine-tooth comb. Looking back at it now, the way the lips are terrible, I can't believe that. Like, what if we hadn't worked out? What would it look like then? After that, we did have a little bit of a calendar pre-roll. That is, that we had several months before the show was going to air. My recollection was that it was early in, I guess it went on in, was it 98? It's 25 years this year.
98, yeah.
Fall 98.
And I think we started in March or April, and then after that I was doing all the scripts, and I would send them to Norman. I don't remember tons of notes, but I imagine there were, and then I believe they were always vetted at the beginning from Norman, and then later on with Kathy Borland, who was the 4Kids producer. I believe that they would send them to Japan. I don't, again, I'm the hero of my own story. I don't remember getting a lot of notes and changing stuff because I was very aware of the types of things that you could say and couldn't say. As far as the show didn't provide a lot of opportunity or didn't come with a lot of that. Any kind of off-color things or risque things or scatological things. But I don't remember a lot of notes. We were really racing to get to those deadlines. And then after several months, I guess, my prime function was to rewrite the scripts because, the voices were already set. And I still think as a director or a writer, it's much easier to direct the voices than I'm sorry if voice directors are listening to this. I think it's much easier to direct the voice actors than to rewrite the scripts. So if the scripts are really tight, it was much easier for the director. And I think at a certain point, but I don't remember when, Jim Malone then stepped in and he was directing the shows. And then eventually, I think.
And you would be faxing pages to us.
Oh yeah, it was. So we had faxes, and sometimes, after a while, then people had other jobs, and sometimes somebody said, "Oh, I have to go away for 2 weeks," or "I'm off on the break," and so I would have to write, let's say, Veronica's lines in 2 episodes. So I would have to write just her lines in episode 9 and 10. And setups and jokes, just the punchline or the setup line, And then I would go back and backfill the other people
Oh, wow.
sometimes, and frequently, or I remember it as frequently, Larry would call, they're on page 29 and we only have up to 30. And I would fax in page 31 and 32, just Tara's lines or just Eric's lines or whatever. It was really crazy. And then that's when we started hiring other writers. Mostly it was John Toohey. If you look at the credits now, there are a lot of the ones that I'm reviewing for the podcast are on Netflix, and there are a lot of names on there. And of course, I recognize almost all of them, but not all of them. There are a couple of names, like, because we would have a writer, and like I had friends that would, oh, I'd love to do that. I said, come on, do it. Here's one that's 2 shows ahead, and they'd say, this is not for me. They would do 1 show, so their name was on the credits, and they would leave the names on the credits from like 15 shows because they didn't want to take the time to change credits for each individual episode. So it's a little misleading. We didn't have 9 writers. It was mostly myself, John Toohey, and then there were a couple of other people whom I haven't gotten to yet in the podcast yet. So I'm sorry if I'm forgetting their names. But and then what would happen is they would send it to me, and not too long ago, I texted with John Toohey. He said, "Yeah, you would send back and say this is terrible, so you redo it." And I punch up the gags and and things like that. It's always easier to criticize something than to create something from scratch, and I certainly did that. So that's a long way of saying, yeah, it was a lot of work, and we were always hammering to keep those broadcast deadlines.
To follow up on Steve's question, it's so crazy to me that, as with all the jobs you had there, that you were never on a conference call with the Japanese team, or...
No, I don't ever remember. I don't remember that at all. I don't believe I ever spoke to anyone. There was a gentleman that used to come in once a year, but I'm not right at the beginning, because I wasn't in the 4Kids offices at first. We were at Buttons, and then we would be at Taj's office for the first, at least, full season.
Right. So if they were there, you wouldn't have interacted.
I wouldn't have known.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Norma was talking, because they had all sorts of coordinating, the launch, and they had, I think, a Toys R Us thing, and of course with the broadcast and with the merchandise and everything, the cards. And but no, I don't. There was one gentleman that used to come, and he used to have like a leopard suit on, and he would come around. He was very energetic. And I think I met him once or twice, but it may have even been after I was done with Pokemon and on to Kirby or Sonic. But no, I don't remember ever having.
I gotta find that guy.
Yeah, Norman will know.
Gotta be a photo.
Kathy
somewhere.
will know. Yeah.
Do you when it got to you, do you know who was naming the Pokemon and giving them the American versions of their names?
Well, as far as the Pokemon were concerned, my recollection is that they all came from Japan. They were already indicated either in the script or to the translator, who was Paul Taylor. He was the translator for 4Kids. He was an American who had spoken Japanese. I think he had been a missionary in Japan or something. I'm not sure. You should talk to Paul Taylor.
Yeah,
too.
I'm writing that down.
But no, we didn't create any of those. Although we did, I remember making up some of the kid names, and those had to be approved. My recollection is that Ash's mother, Delia, I did because my mother's name was Delia. Now, other people may say that is not true, and it's possible, but I think it's a big coincidence, and that's what I remember. But as I said, maybe it wasn't. Maybe I'm just misremembering that.
Who is arguing with you about that? That's my question.
No, I'm just anticipating the argument.
I see. Okay.
I've had, yeah.
I mean, it's not a common name. I can't imagine that's not why.
Yeah, I can't remember it means flower or something. And I think as we first see her, she's gardening, and so I thought, oh, maybe I may be making that part up. I don't know.
I've heard you talk about this before, but I'd love to talk to you more about why you gave yourself roles in the early episodes and how you didn't know what was coming. Like, how many episodes ahead were you allowed to see, and the process of, jumping in the booth when you needed to?
As far as seeing scripts for episodes, we would get a translated script from Paul Taylor would get the original Japanese script. I don't even think it was, well, let me go back to that. It may not have been at the beginning. He may have just had to translate it from listening to the scripts. He would know that. I don't remember being privy to that or part of that. I certainly wasn't part of it, and I don't remember. And then it would be delivered to us with time-coded script. So it would be the character name, the time code, which is a running sort of clock that's on all video, and it would have the start time, hours, minutes, seconds, and frames, and then it would have the stop time as well, and then the dialogue, a direct translation. Of course, I don't like that term because there's no such thing as a straight translation. I mean, it's an interpretation. And he would also, I believe, add notes if there was something unusual about it. Like he would translate it and he would say maybe this is a pun on the Japanese word, or something like that. And so then I would take that, and I had it was left over from the Horror Hall of Fame. It was I think it was a 9-inch color television with a VCR built into it. And I had a remote control, and I would start it and stop it and rewind it with the remote control. And then I would, look at the line. I would watch the character do it. I would listen to the character. I would write what I thought was the right amount of syllables, and then I would rewind it, and then I would play it again to see if I could. So I would say, "Hey guys, look over there! It looks like a Piplup." Or well, Piplup was after that. It looks like a Pikachu. And then I would say that and try to keep, what the pace would be, how intense it would be. And so, hundreds of lines like that. And so
wow,
that's why
tedious.
It's very tedious. And, just going back for a second, I had people had said, "Hey, I can do this," or whatever. And a lot of talented people that I knew, some of them I knew and some of them I didn't, that had good credits. And they were talented and funny and they could do things, but it was just the process of trying to match that was just too tedious for them. It was like lace making. It was just one stitch at a time.
It's
and
math.
It took hours and
math.
hours. Yeah. And the thing is, at the beginning, I wish I look at the shows now, it's like, oh, that's a flap off. Gee, did this slip when Netflix said, I did the best I could, I think, most of the time. Some of the things were really tough because I always felt that, coming from that American point of view, that matching the flaps when I say flaps, I mean mouth movements, matching those was a value because it's done in a different way and because it has a different sort of tradition. To me, it doesn't. I think it's obvious that it's not that crucial or important in Japan because they have a different process. Although I understand, I've read recently where they're changing that a little bit now, and some places are recording the voice track first and animating to that. So I think maybe AI tools are going to be helping them or what. I don't know if that's true or not. But yeah, it was a very, very tedious process. It was, but it was in broadcast television. And I had come from that, meeting deadlines on shows and working on live shows. You had, I don't want to say adrenaline. I don't think I ever had much adrenaline, but a lot of the times, especially at 3 o'clock in the morning with the mouse infested office I was working in on 28th Street. But, you knew you had to get that thing. It was just like, well, it has to be done. It has to be done. And then it started piling up. And then some people, and then I started farming the scripts out. And some people were good or they were pretty good. And some were just bad. And it was too late to have them redo it. So I would just redo them too. But anyway, yeah. And then eventually I was strictly on writing the scripts. And then eventually I went to after I think about 209 episodes. I haven't gotten there yet. I really want to eyeball each episode, but I think it's 209 episodes. And then writing the scripts for 4 movies and voice directing the 4
of the
movies.
Pokemon movies, yeah.
The Pokemon movies. And then there were there was always a short subject with the movie, I think, too. Like Pikachu's winter vacation, summer vacation thing. So that, yeah, it was busy, but it was, it became such a hit. It was just banging them out there as best you could. Best I could, I guess. Everybody could.
What led to you leaving the show to work on other stuff? Was that just around the time that 4Kids lost the license, or was
it was an arrest? I don't like to talk about it. No,
I don't want to picture you in.
No, you know what it was. Now this is as far as my knowledge is concerned. I think that what happened was Pokemon was a gigantic hit, and so 4Kids and Norman especially, and of course Alcon, of course. I think saw this as, now this is a thing where we have this engine where we can be the producers of the shows adapt the shows and then also do the licensing. And so it became like not only the licensing company, but like a kind of an anime TV studio, a localization studio. So they had, and because with the strength of Pokemon, they got other shows onto. I don't even know we were working so hard. Was it CW first or Kids WB or Fox Box?
Fox Box.
Yeah, Fox Box.
I think Fox Box
I
was
think Fox
first,
Box
and then
was first.
and then it moved to CW, I think, and then
Yeah.
it started being on twice a day. And but anyway, so they acquired Yu-Gi-Oh, and then they had a bunch of shows. I think Ultraman
Well,
came
you
and went.
moved over to Kirby, right? After
Yeah,
those
that's what I'm saying.
200
So
episodes.
there were then I think Norman and Al decided, like, let's make this like a factory where we have all these these shows, and we control the production of the show, or they, the post production. It's not the original production of the show. And then, although they eventually did that with Chaotic, but and then we also have the licensing, and then let's get as many shows as we can. So they had Fighting Food. Tara, you probably know better than me. Fighting Foodons, Ultimate Muscle,
Funky Cops. Don't forget about
oh my
Funky
gosh,
Cops.
Funky Cops. Yeah, Funky Cops. Ultraman was in there for a little bit. Then I guess One Piece. I don't know where it fell in the sequence of events. And then
Viva Pinata. I mean,
Viva Pinata. And of course they
go on all day.
They were going, and Lloyd was working on Turtles at that time as well, right?
Well, Turtles was a whole. I mean, that was a whole staff. That was huge. Yeah.
Right.
A whole different staff
that was a
came
production.
In for that.
They were actually, producing the show from scratch.
Yeah. And what we didn't actually say was at a certain point, production moved from our recording moved from Taj Productions into the 4Kids built their own recording studio. So I don't remember what year that was, but then we actually would see all the people that worked there,
right,
which was totally different for us.
Right. Yeah. And so, that was the idea to have this kind of, and all the studios were linked so that you could do any show from any studio. I don't know if it always worked, but it worked a lot of the time, I guess. And it just kind of got more studios built out. And that went on for quite a few years, right? I mean, it was really going great for a long while. And then Pokemon took the license back, and that triggered, from what I understand, Yu-Gi-Oh trying to do the same thing, and eventually they did. Konami took it back, but it wasn't as clean, as successful. That's a whole other story. You could ask Norman or Al about that.
That's a later podcast.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I wanted you to tell the story, because I do like how you talk about this, about how you ended up in the booth doing some of the voices on Pokemon, because you always say that you're not an actor, but clearly you're very talented.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. But look, I mean, anybody can say char char char, right? I mean, the thing was, my recollection
Not like that.
My recollection was that, I saw these little critters. That, again, I see, you go to all these conventions. You go to a lot more than I do. So, you've been doing it longer than I have. What happens is these stories become sort of codified and ossified. I don't want to say ossified. I think some do. And they sort of take on a life of their own. Not that I'm saying they're not true, but they became the same thing. And I've said this now many times. And every time I say it now recently, I start thinking to myself, is this really true? Did this really happen? And it kind of has to do with what you said, like who was paying the actors. It was my recollection that 4Kids paid the actors. But now that you mentioned that you believe that it was Taj paying the actors, I'm wondering, was this taken out of the fee? I don't think so. Could it have been?
But see, I could be wrong too. We'll fact check all of this.
The thing is, someone will, and the only thing is, someone will come in and say, "Oh, it was definitely this or that." Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it wasn't. Everybody who says this is the fact, I'm a little bit. If many people say it, then okay. The actors would certainly know better than I was. Larry was the money and scheduling guy, and I was trying to write the scripts. But the thing is, my recollection was that, we would book the actors, and it took a while to figure it out. I mean, we kind of had figured it out on Slayers, but every actor is different, and each character is different. We had sort of a formula for how long it would take each actor to do their role. So if it was 100 lines, it's like we said, like 2.5 minutes a line, but over 50, then you had to have a 15-minute break. And so they had kind of a formula that we eventually always tinkered with and were frequently wrong with. But because you had technical problems too. But anyway, my recollection was that if we booked an actor, say, for 2 hours, and he or she got finished in an hour and 45 minutes, that I would say, okay, we have 20 of this little creature, Metapod. I'm just going to go in, Metapod, Metapod. It's easy. You make it sound like the Japanese one, Metapod, put a little effect on it, we're done. And
that's a good point, though.
That...
At the beginning, we did try to map, people did ask that online. How did you find the voices? And at the beginning, that was the template. We listened to the Japanese and just matched the voice and changed the word, basically, right?
Definitely. But the thing is, Taj was at that time paying Buttons for by the hour, or he even had a deal. But I think it was an hourly rate. So the thing was, we wanted to pack as much recording into as little time as possible. So the thing was, if we had 15 minutes of downtime 3 times a day, they're almost an hour by the time the actor gets in, we get the coffee, we get the hot tea, the whole thing. So it was just trying to pack as much in there so that Taj could retain as much of the money that they were getting per episode. And so that was part of it too. But it was also like, as I have said many times now, I didn't realize that a lot of these Pokemon, you can never tell. You could never tell which Pokemon were going to recur. As I said before, we would just get one script at a time. I didn't have like 10 scripts so I could look ahead. That's my memory. And so I said, okay, Rattata, I'll do that. And then, they'll almost never see Rattata again. But then Charmander comes. It seems like from the script, he's a one-off, but then he's in the next episode, and he's in 10 more episodes. He's in the movies, in the game. He's, making personal appearances and opening shopping centers and whatever, so that's how it happened. And so it was fortunate early on. I've also mentioned this at the conventions that, people would say, oh, you got paid a lot of money. I never got paid specifically to do the Pokemon voices, except one time they were doing a commercial for the first big video game. That's my recollection of it. I don't know if that was Pokemon Stadium or Pokemon, I forget. I think it's Pokemon Stadium. And somebody from the agency said, okay, these are the names, these are the Pokemon that we need. And I was about half a dozen of them, or maybe more. I don't really remember.
I remember this. Yeah.
And then we got it. Were you on that? And did you get a residual check?
Yeah, I made more money from that commercial than I did doing the entire show, probably.
Like the whole year. And then, but then they never did that again. And from my recollection.
Well, I heard that they just were given the sound files later.
Oh, that's probably true. Yeah, in fact, somebody told me a couple of conventions ago that I did Snorlax, and they say that the Snorlax is still on the most recent games. I don't know if that's true or not.
Your most recent credit is Snorlax and Super Smash
Brothers.
Well,
maybe they credit me, and maybe it's me, it's maybe not. Everything, a lot of salt.
Yeah, I can't. I haven't pulled up the credits to that game recently. Sometimes it's just fans just know, and they will update the sites too.
Oh, the fans definitely know a lot more. But they also, Wikipedia had me as, or no, not Wikipedia. What is it? Bulbapedia. I think I was born. I was born in 1966 in Norcross, Georgia. Where they got that, I don't know, but I'll take it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I mean, but that's another good point. Sometimes if I was in the booth to save time, I would do some other Pokemon that wasn't really my Pokemon. I remember that with Marill or Bellflower, and so it led to many of us playing the same roles, which is confusing because the fans do want to know, and I don't think any of us kept notes about any of this.
I don't think so. Some people are very, very definitive about what the things that they did and they didn't do. I mean, I remember some, but as when I was directing, sometimes I question myself, even if it's like, oh no, you did it, and I listen to it, it's like, was that me, or was that me telling someone to do that and to do it like the way I'm doing it? So everything I say here and on the podcast, Original Pokemon, I always say
wherever you get your podcasts.
Wherever you get your podcast. This is how I remember it, but I could be really wrong.
I think a lot of times on this podcast, and we're learning, we're going to say, do you remember? Because, and the answer is going to be maybe. So thank you for jogging your memory.
Thank you. I'd have to do some jogging.
So a question came in from social media that I was going to ask anyway, but I will give this person credit. It came in from Nick Quattrini, sent in this question. They wanted to know, obviously, and I love hearing you talk about this, about the rice balls, calling them jelly donuts. Let's talk about that. The elephant in the donut. Let's talk. Yeah.
Again, okay, so this is a more recent story that I've told, and it's not completely calcified and ossified into mythic, untrue legend, I don't think. My recollection of this was that this was definitely, it was a relatively early episode. It was definitely me. Whether I ever asked Norman about it or not, that I don't know. That may be a false recovered memory. I can't say that I did or not. But my recollection was that I said it once, and it was exactly the type of line. Let me just back up a little bit. When I'm doing the podcast, I go episode by episode. I haven't seen the episodes in 25 years, and I don't like to skip ahead. But because at these conventions, people started asking me, I got on YouTube and somebody had made like a supercut. I saw like rice balls or jelly donuts, Brock jelly donuts. I said, okay, let me just look at this. My recollection was that he said this line like, wow, these jelly donuts are really great, or whatever the line was. And this is exactly the type of line that I used to always say to the writers. This is what I called a hamburger line, because I think there was an episode that I hadn't done the first pass on, that Ash was eating a hamburger and he said something like, gee, these hamburgers are really delicious. And it was like, this is a hamburger. This is the type of line I hate, because you're seeing that he's enjoying a hamburger. I don't need him to say that. He could say something like, gee, these taste just like the ones mom never made, or it's like a gag or something, gag adjacent or whatever. You don't have to say what you're seeing. So, but I violated my own later rule by saying just something about the jelly donut. But I looked at the supercut. I said, like, oh, supercut. I said it one time. Brock says it like, it seems like 35 times in that episode. Jelly donut. Hey, I should have had those jelly donuts. Hey, where's you dropped your jelly donut? And like, oh my gosh. Now maybe he only said it 3 or 4.
Well,
I don't remember.
I think also that has the same number of syllables as the original Japanese word, right? Isn't it?
Onigiri, jelly donut, maybe. But here's the thing.
Yeah, 4 syllables. That's.
Now you remember, we didn't get tons of physical fan mail. At that time the internet existed, but it wasn't like huge, and not everybody had a phone and was texting and everything, especially young kids who mostly watching the show. And so I had very little contact with the fans. But subsequently, years later, 4Kids is terrible. We hate 4Kids. They destroy everything. They've censored all these things. Why don't they just do a straight translation?
Yeah.
They just, well, not only Americanized, yes, definitely that, but also like just trying to disrespect or destroy Japanese culture. And as I said recently, I don't know if you were there, it's like, I think well, I didn't have time to, if I had wanted to destroy Japanese culture, which I didn't think was really within my power, I wouldn't have had time. I didn't have time to think about it. I was just trying to figure, like, to me, onigiri was not going to fly in the United States. I didn't think rice ball was. Now, the guys who know rice balls here are in, Bensonhurst and Carroll Gardens, the Italian rice balls that Nana makes, but this thing with the white, now, did it look like a jelly donut? To me, it did, I guess. Maybe it was late at night. I don't know. I was stuck. I should have avoided it. I didn't. But then I've started saying, but do I regret it? Absolutely not, because it usually takes up 5 minutes of this panel that we have, and people, So am I sorry I did it? Not exactly, because people are talking about it, 25 years later. So, and I don't think I hurt anybody. And if I did, I'm really sorry. But what I did not understand, and what I have recently researched, is what the rice ball means in Japanese culture. I mean, this is like kids having milk and cookies, but exponentially multiplied. This is like such endemic, such a deeply rooted thing in Japanese culture. And, their mom would always make it, and all sorts of things that I did not know. And so I don't know if I'm exactly sorry, but I was ignorant of that. I was definitely ignorant of that. And I apologize.
And it doesn't seem like, I don't know, I think this mentality might come from like later adaptations, but there wasn't this whole anti-Japanese approach, like, no, all this has to go. This, well, this is just you on the fly saying like, It's like, this is kind of how it is. Just like, this is so.
There was no motive.
Yeah,
You know what?
there's no motive here.
The motive was to Americanize, or when I say America, I mean North America, Canada, U.S., and other non-American but English-speaking territories, was to Americanize the show. I mean, there were certain things I think people will always find out, oh, there's still Japanese writing on this and this scene, but it was 4Kids' decision to change the signs. If there were a physical sign, I think that was a good decision. I don't the intent was not to denigrate or insult Japanese culture. It was just so that kids watching it in English speaking countries would know what it said. I don't think that's so bad. Not like calling a rice bowl jelly donut. That's terrible. It was bad, I guess, but I don't know. I still sleep pretty well at night.
I think we got over it.
Although I get up more frequently.
I could just remember watching it as a kid, and I'm like, that's the weirdest chili donut I've ever seen.
What do you think? Well, let me ask you, do you think it would have been better if I had said rice ball? No, I'm not challenging you. Maybe it would. I guess it was. It would have been.
Hindsight is 2020, but I could think of, like, if you said rice ball, I think it would just piqued my curiosity. Like, well, what's a rice ball?
I take full responsibility for it. I don't. Yeah, I mean.
But also, you're right. There was no Google. I think kids today, kids today don't realize that we couldn't just Google things. We couldn't just this.
Oh no, that's very nice of you, Tara. You're making excuses for a dopey thing that I did that was totally unnecessary. As I said, I think I could have avoided saying what it was. That would have been the best. That would have been the best. I think, as I said, I haven't seen the full episode, but I think it probably could have been possible to just avoid calling it anything. Why I didn't do that, I don't know.
Did you watch back the episodes when they were done being recorded, or once you were done writing, were you kind of done with it?
Oh, no, I wasn't done with it. No, I would, even when my recollection is that at least early on, when we had Jim directing and I was still writing, I still think I would review the episodes. I know that I did that on other series, and I would, say, well, this seems, I don't know, I would give notes to the voice director saying, he seems to need to be sadder on this line, punch this up. Eventually, when other directors are doing it, you may remember this, Tara, and I always felt they were totally ignored, but I did it anyway. I would like underline and do things. It's like, hit the word that, like, you could say, that's funny. Okay, that's funny. Or that's funny. Or you could say, that's funny. You could say it a lot of different ways. And what would happen was, because they were doing people out of order, and the pace of having these shows go so fast, I always felt like there was a column for comments. And so I thought I was helping the director. I think sometimes it may have. I better not say anything more about this.
No, I used to. I think I still do appreciate that, because there's some music you obviously heard with the line, and because I didn't have the advantage of maybe I recorded first and I didn't hear what the read was going to be like going into my line.
Right. Remember, the actors were seeing the script for the first time they walked in. I mean, maybe at the beginning, maybe the first couple of episodes, maybe somebody got them in advance. I don't remember.
I definitely didn't know.
Yeah. And so you weren't, a lot of times, if you were early in there or in a scene where no other actor had been recorded, you're not playing off anyone. So, you would try to put the mood. And if the director hadn't seen the show, I felt like, let me put these directions in. I hope they helped. I think, I hope they helped. This is as far as I'll go.
Yeah, I mean, we had paper scripts, so we had rewrites and things all over them, and maybe by the end we had 17,000 things being underlined, and we would leave funny notes to each other on the scripts, and So, Michael, after your 209-ish episodes of Pokemon,
I think so. I think it's about that, but yeah.
It was Kirby the next thing you worked on?
Kirby was the next series, and at that point, I was working at 4Kids as a 4Kids employee, because Norman wanted to take all the production in-house. But Larry was still doing the production out of house at Taj for Pokemon. Kathy Borland was producing. And then I was the producer and writer and director, at least for the first part of Kirby. And then, so that went for, I think, a couple of seasons. this is terrible. I can't remember who directed. Was it? It could have been.
I'm looking it up on IMDb. This is how we learn about our past is through
Oh yeah.
IMDb. So did you approach that differently since you had Pokemon under your belt? Did you approach Kirby differently as like a new project?
Well, it was a different show, but no. I mean, the basics were the same. You got the same translations. You cast the actors. At that point, we had, we always tried to have actors do multiple roles at the beginning with Pokemon, because we didn't want them to leave. It was better for us to have the actors more available. They made more money. It was easier for us. I think it worked in that way, more or less. By the time we were doing Kirby, there were several shows, so we had a lot of people working shows. And so, but you didn't do a regular.
Yeah, no, I was Fololo and Fa-La-La.
Fololo and Fa-La-La. I liked Pokemon. I think was a good show. I also liked Kirby. I thought Kirby was a cute show. It was a good show. I liked that. Eric was Meta Knight. He came up with that voice that was kind of and then so that was a couple. I don't know. It seemed like a lot of episodes.
It looks like 101 episodes of this show. I'm looking at IMDb
2 seasons.
now. IMDb thinks that Andrew Rannells might have directed some of the episodes.
That's exactly right. That's right. It was Andrew.
Yeah, the star of Book of Mormon, and
that's right.
Girls.
He was a great guy.
Fancy pants now. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he did voices and stuff too. And then he was he was James in the Big Stage Show. He doesn't like to talk about that. But,
no.
Well, he likes to talk about that in a certain way. But yes. I don't blame him. But yeah. And then after that, I went on to Sonic X. And yeah, Sonic X, I never loved the show that much. The thing is, I was only a very secondary creative person in these. I mean, they were the franchise was created based on the game, and then the Japanese had all sorts of writers. And so when you say, oh, I was the director, well, yeah, sort of, but it wasn't my favorite show. Who was the director on that one? Was it Darren? Was Darren directing that?
That's a good question. Let's find out. You keep talking. I'll find out. Steve, you talk while I do this.
And just going off what you said, just the way you described it, maybe I'm misinterpreting. Was Sega a little more hands-on with that show?
No. My recollection was that none of that Pokemon Company was not, and neither was Sega. I'm trying to remember. Kirby was
Nintendo.
Is Nintendo? No. We would meet with Gail, and I went out to Washington once, and we talked to the people, and they were involved. It wasn't that they had no involvement, but it was mostly, I think, financially involvement. They had meetings with Norman, and they were always very nice. And I never had, because the show was already done, and it was done by their company. So how much damage could I really do? They didn't have any jelly donuts in Kirby.
But were there censorship issues? I know with some shows there were, and a bunch of people online asked that question.
Yeah, that was always a popular question. I mean, they as time went on, they're just 4Kids is destroying the shows, they're censoring the shows, and as I said at the conventions, these shows were on broadcast television. They were sort of the last gasp of kids' Saturday morning and weekday morning TV. Broadcast TV was changing. Cable was becoming much stronger, with Nickelodeon and other channels that were really gaining popularity. But, the stations were very wary of having any kind of controversial material, especially in kids' shows. They didn't like violence. They didn't like anything sexual. They didn't want anything scatological, of course. And for the most part, the shows came in without that material. There were episodes like the episode in Pokemon with James that came out, and he was a very buxom version of James with a string bikini, and he was very breasticular in that episode, and that wasn't shown. There was an episode of Pokemon in which they kind of go to an old Wild West style town, as I remember it, and they had a lot of cowpokes or Toro pokes, and they all pointed guns at Ash. And I'm not sure that one, again, I have to get there. I'm not sure if that one ever aired. I mean, there were some episodes that I would look at and I would call Norman and say, you know what, there's a scene here. I think we can change this, or maybe we can loop something or something, because the shows had to be a certain number of minutes too. They couldn't go under a certain time. They couldn't go over a certain time. So I couldn't cut 5 minutes out of a show unless I could restore 4 of those, there were time limits. And I think there were the Porygon episode, to my recollection, we never dubbed. People ask me on Twitter or X, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think we did.
That was never done. The one with James in the bikini, I can't remember if we ever did that and just cut that or replace that with something. That I don't remember. I haven't gotten there working on the podcast. I don't remember. The one with the guns, I don't know. I think we did do it, or I can't remember. Again, I haven't eyeballed it in 25 years, so I have to think. I'm sure there's someone out there who knows.
I don't know how far along maybe somebody's got in production, but I'm pretty that I think the one with James, and I think it's the guns. I think that's the Safari Zone episode. I think those never made air.
Yeah, so. I think, and people sometimes ask me, did you ever dub it? Because somebody saw a dub of it or thinks it was dubbed. And there were some of those episodes like, no, I don't think the Porygon, I'm pretty sure Norman wouldn't have even wanted to have a dub out there because it was just too dangerous, that one. So that's my recollection. But again, so many people, virtually everyone who watches the show knows at least as much about me about that, and usually a lot more, especially the fans and the super fans.
To answer your question about Sonic X, the two directors listed are Andrew Rannells and Chris Collet.
Oh, Chris Collet. I hadn't remembered that. Yeah, I guess Andrew did probably more than Chris did. It's sometimes, as I said, sometimes the credits will list 5 people and you figure, oh, each one of them did 20%. Sometimes it was 1 or 2 and they just put the credits on there so you wouldn't have to redo them. I'm not casting aspersions either or praising Andrew or Chris, but yeah. And then we went from there to F-Zero, and that was a short-lived one. And I think we may have dubbed a couple of episodes that never aired on that one. That was a racing game. I think it was a Sega game.
Nintendo.
And it was a Nintendo game?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that was a wacky, freaky show. And then after that, at 4Kids decided, hey, all these other companies are making money on cards and games. Why don't we at 4Kids create our own property? And so Al Kahn, I think, had met a couple of people who had linked up with a man named Martin Ralph, who was from Scandinavia someplace, and he had made these premium item drawings that were cards that were in some kind of a product or some kind of a giveaway. I don't know. And so we worked with him a little bit on creating, and Norman was also very involved with creating Chaotic, and that was an original series. I don't know that Martin was very happy with that. We did 1 season in kind of flash animation, talk about flashing back to the past, flash animation up in Canada at a studio. And the next year we changed to a more anime style, and I think it was more successful. We thought because of Flash, because of the budget and the production time, it would easier. But eventually we went to a Korean company who animated the other seasons. And then for me, after that, I did a series, which in a way, I liked it the most. It was a Korean series called Tai Chi Chasers. And there were at least two seasons of the series, but that was when the whole Yu-Gi-Oh! Lawsuit and bankruptcy and everything hit in. And the first season ended on a cliffhanger, and I was like, wow, how is he going to get out of it? Kai, how is he going to get, and they had the grandmother, I think, and so I never found out. And then I became involved with promoting the channel, and hung on for a couple more years, and then got kicked out when Saban bought the broadcast half and Konami bought Yu-Gi-Oh! Back. So, and that was the end for me. That was Kitens. And then, thanks to Tara Sands, I'm signing cards and going to conventions and doing all that stuff.
Well, it's much more fun when you're there.
Oh, I feel the same way, Tara, that it is more fun when I'm there. No, when you're there, I meant. No, I love seeing Tara. Tara's great. Tara was always great to work with and fun.
Oh, stop it.
No, it really is true, except that one day was terrible.
That one day was weird. No, we're kidding.
Well, it was more than one day. No, all right,
Before we talk about what you're doing today, Steve, did
well,
you
I'm
have
not doing
any more
anything, so
questions?
that's.
No, we're going to talk about your podcast, but Steve, did you have any more questions for Michael?
I'm curious, when did like all this started kind of coming back to you with, because eventually, of course, 4Kids fizzled out. When did all of a sudden like the oh hey, you're the voice of like these Pokemon, or you directed on the show? When did this kind of come back to you? Like when did people kind of start acknowledging this again?
100% Tara Sands.
Yeah.
Tara.
I introduced him to my convention agent.
Right. She was signing cards and she was selling sets of Bulbasaur, Squirtle, and Charmander cards. And she contacted me. I guess it's almost 3 years ago now, I think.
Yeah.
And
probably.
she said, "Would you like to sign some of these?" And we did, and it was around Christmas or something. I don't even remember. And then she introduced me to the people at Celebworks who have been great, and I get to see Tara a lot, not as much as I would like to, but and the people at the conventions are so great. But I did see the catalyst for the podcast, which kind of happened. I think it was I mean, I'm so slow. I only have 8 episodes. I'm the huge like procrastinator of the year, or like a lifetime achievement award. Partly because I know I'm always going to get stuff wrong, because every episode I do, I say something and then I get emails saying, that really wasn't right, because it was really James who said that, whatever. But anyhow, I was going to start going to convention. I said, well, I better look at what these panels are like. Of course, I may be inventing the story of the timeline, but and I heard some people. There would come some stories that I heard that's like, that is not the way I remember it. And so people involved with the show. And so I thought, you know what? I'm not going to go down and say they're wrong, but I'm going to get on and just do my memories of what it was like to work on the show, and the goofs that I made, and I made a lot, and the things that I was unaware of, and all the cultures I destroyed, and all the people I censored, and everything, that kind of thing, and just a little bit of the background of it, and why things happened and when they happened. And it's I was about to say it's been fun. That's something that people say when they're on podcasts. I haven't really had fun at it, because it's a lot of work. I got to go down and I got to look back at things and try to verify things and remember, and so. But I only have 200 more episodes to go. And at this rate, I have to live to be 411 years old.
Say the name of your podcast again, Michael, before we let
Thank
you go.
Thank you. This has been Steve and Tara, of course. Thank you so much for having me. I feel very honored. It's probably just because everybody else is out doing has a job.
No, you were first on you were our first interview
nice
for a reason.
Thank you. She's always loved. My podcast is Original Pokéman. And it's on Spotify and Google and all the other things. So Original Pokéman, and I always put my email address on there. And so please write to me, and I'll get back to you in 6 or 8 months.
This just reminded me of my very last question, unless Steve wants
Sure.
to jump in.
No,
the
go ahead,
pronunciation of Pokemon. Do you remember
this was a big thing.
Of this?
This was a big thing. In the first couple of episodes, and I mentioned this podcast, it's Pokemon. It's all over the place. Pokemon. And eventually, the way I say it is is Pokemon. So between an A and an E, Pokemon, in there. Whether that's right or not, I don't know. But that's what we did. After
Were there a
while.
lot of meetings about this? Like, do you remember?
I do remember that it was a big thing, and I remember, again, this may be false recovered memory, asking Norman, like, how do we do this? How do we say this? Because we got to know, and I'm not 100% sure. I shouldn't say that the people at Nintendo of America didn't know, but we had to get the show done, and I don't remember how we eventually settled on Pokemon, but it must have been, because I wouldn't have done this on my own. I must have gotten approval for Pokemon, or that's not even right. It's hard for me to say it the wrong way, or the other way. Pokemon.
Oh,
Pokemon.
Oh.
I think
There was
Pokemon's the most
Pokemon.
common mispronunciation.
Pokemon. Yeah,
Yeah.
Pokemon is a lot, and Pokemon.
Yeah, with
That's
the E.
sometimes too. But I say Pokemon. But if I think about it, I can't say it. So I can't think about it. Tara,
Thank
Steve,
you.
thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
That was so much fun. Thank you guys for listening to our interview with Michael Haigney.
Yeah, it was a real joy. I was very happy to be a part of that.
I told you he was the best, right?
He's
I
great.
did. Yeah, so you guys definitely check him out. He's on Instagram at Michael_Haigney, Haigney. And also check out his podcast. He's the best at, it's called Original Pokémon, wherever you get your podcasts.
And speaking of podcasts, we hope you enjoyed ours and hope you catch us next week.
Catch 'em all. 4Kids Flashback is a production of Maji Media, hosted by Tara Sands and Steve Yurko.
Producers are Zach Logan, Tara Sands, and Steve Yurko.
For more information, go to 4kidsflashback.com. That is the number 4. And if you worked at 4Kids and have a story you want to share, please email us at 4kidsflashback@gmail.com.
You can find us on social media at 4Kids Flashback, and to listen early and ad-free, head to patreon.com/4kidsflashback. And for podcast merchandise, find links on our website and Linktree.
As they say on every podcast, if you liked this show, please subscribe, rate, and review, and tell your friends, or 4. If you want to check out other Maji Media podcasts, go to Maji, MAJI.media. Thanks for listening.